Okay. Hello, and welcome to The Mohit Show. Today I'll be covering stories from r/detrans, a well-moderated subreddit for people questioning, desisting, or detransitioning. I will be protecting the identities of these posters since individuals in this community have been harassed when their stories have been discussed. Now on to this video's first post, titled, Losing My Mind, End of HRT and Major Surgery. I feel like a wreck. My last testosterone shot was 1 week ago. I'm a little over 4 weeks out from a hysterectomy for endometriosis. I kept one ovary to avoid having to be on any form of HRT. I was on testosterone for 2 years and on estrogen blockers to stop my cycle for almost 2.5 years. It has been a while since I've experienced my body's natural hormones. Lately, I have been waking up between 4 and 5 a.m., and I feel like my skin is on fire. I keep having crazy dreams about self-harm and or blood, which is unusual for me as I have never self-harmed and do not have issues with blood. My acne is terrible. Emotionally, I feel like I'm going insane. I haven't been so aware of my emotions probably ever. For most of my life, I lived in various states of dissociation/disconnection from my emotions and physical body. I feel so aware of every single emotion. I feel so aware of my body. I'm having serious self-esteem issues. I have a hard time believing that anyone is going to find me attractive or desirable because I now have increased body and facial hair. Speaking of hair, I decided to grow my hair out for the first time in almost 4 years. I really miss my long hair, and it cannot grow back fast enough. I have to go back to work soon, and I hate all my clothes. I regret getting rid of all my other clothes. I'm also worried about radically changing my appearance. I made a fuss about pronoun usage at work before going on medical leave, and it has been almost 2 months since then. I have no idea what I am going back to when I return. I realize now that I do not give a S about pronouns. I have no desire to be androgynous anymore. I want to go back to identifying as a woman. I was such a beautiful woman. I wish I could go back in time and never go down this path. Well, except for the hysterectomy. It is so nice to not be in physical pain or deal with menstruation for the rest of my life. I feel so free and so trapped at the same time. Next post, titled, Idealization of Transitioning. In the trans community, transitioning is described to be the solution for anyone who has any type of gender discomfort. Also, many people describe it as a very advanced process in the scientific sense, when, especially, the bottom surgeries are highly experimental and almost everyone that gets it has at least one complication related to it. Same with HRT, hormone replacement therapy. It's supposed to give you a completely different physique, while actually there are many more negative things to it than positive. For example, good things about T: facial hair, body fat distribution, more strength. Bad things about T: possibility of developing illnesses on your reproductive system, infertility, hair loss, mood swings, change in personality, etc. Many people don't even consider all the downsides of this. It's not perfect, and I'm not saying no one should transition if they really want to, but many irresponsible people, mostly teens, don't really think this thoroughly enough. And many of them end up regretting it. From the comments, the issue is that transition is presented as a miracle cure and as the only treatment for dysphoria, with the consequence of not transitioning ASAP supposedly being certain death. Another commenter adds, when you are young, you are much more naive to the reality of medical problems. When they tell you of the medical complications that could happen from tea in the future, it doesn't really compute. At least it didn't to me as a teenager. It went in one ear, out the other. Teens make other dumb health decisions too, like smoking cigarettes, doing drugs, drinking, without really being able to mentally envision what it will be like to actually end up with the consequences. Teens think they are invincible in a sense. Also, if you are depressed and suicidal, it's irresponsible to be allowed to take HRT and do surgeries. When you are that low, you aren't thinking clearly. It's a last-ditch effort, and people say this all the time. If I don't start HRT, I will kill myself. Obviously not the correct mental state to be making any big decisions. Another commenter adds, the fact that detransitioners and desisters exist is proof that transitioning is definitely not the only option to fight off gender dysphoria. What the hell is gender affirmation therapy? Why should a therapist affirm your illness? They want you to be ill so you can be a perpetual patient to doctors and pharmaceutical companies. Another commenter adds, yeah, I find in places I frequent, transitioning is highly celebrated, and HRT is talked about quite lightly. A lot of people come out and seem to rush to start medical transitioning soon after. I get that people want to achieve what I am, their view solidifies them as the gender they are transitioning to. Let me reread that. I get that people want to achieve what in their view solidifies them as the gender they are transitioning to, but, at least from what they let on, people don't seem to really stop and go to therapy to unpack their feelings and instead rush for whatever validation they can get. Next post, titled, I'm uncomfortable and confused. I have been trans for about 3 years now. I have not medically transitioned, but I have socially. I was on Twitter the other day and found out about detransitioners and people talking about why they transitioned in the first place. Hearing the stories, it all resonated with me. I do not want to be a man. I just want to be respected. I thought my social transition and soon medical transition would save me from being sexualized the way I was as a woman, but it has gotten worse. The amount of people I have seen as a trans female-to-male fetish has actually made me delete Twitter for a while. They still sexualize my female parts, even as a man. There's no escaping it. People like that never saw me as a man, but as an extreme tomboy. It makes me sick knowing I will never be able to escape that sexualization, even if I cut my boobs off and sewed up my vagina. I also wanted to be a man because, as a woman, I was scared of men. I could not see myself being in a relationship with a man because I assumed they'd all either sexualize me or abuse me in other ways. But that does not mean I didn't desire it. While I was repulsed by the idea of dating men, I still got frequent crushes on them. So, I thought, maybe if I were a man myself, that fear would go away. They would see me as an equal. They would respect me and my boundaries. They would love me in a way that wasn't completely and only sexual. Reading BLs like a Heartstopper and even Boyfriends to an extent made me believe this idea even more. The type of relationship these men had with their partners is what I desired. But it did not work out as planned. Bi men saw me as a man, in quotations because they usually did not, but fetishized me for my female parts. And gay men flat out rejected me for them. By the time I realized I would not be able to be with a man the way I wanted, I was already too deep in my social transition. I think if I detransition now, I would not only lose all my friends, but basically have to tell people how much of a liar I am. Due to me being homeschooled, I only have online friends right now, and I lied to them saying I was a cis man. I am scared that if they find out I was born a woman, they'll all sexualize me, hate me for lying, or treat me completely different. The way my friend group treats the women versus the men is crazy and honestly disgusting. The women get no respect at all. And it would be so awkward to change my name back too, since everyone knows me as my male name. I'm going to a real high school this fall, and I've told everyone there that's my name. Plus, I've made some friends there already, and they all think I'm a cis man. The principal even has it down in the system for me, and I do not want to burden them by taking it out, especially since I don't even know if I want to use my real name anyways. I do not want to keep going back and forth and whenever I feel like it, going my name is blank today. I do not want to go back to the way I was perceived when I was a cis woman, but it's not like I get treated any better now. As a cis woman, I wrote a story about this man who was getting sexually abused. It paralleled my own experiences, but I changed the gender. The reason I did this was because it made me physically sick to draw any sort of vagina plus penis sex. Even just looking at it genuinely painful to me. This sounds weird, but it is almost like I can feel the pain myself. So, I made the character a man since I've never felt anal, and it didn't hurt to look at or draw. I do not know if that was the best idea. I think maybe there were other ways for me to handle it, but that was the easiest way for me to get my abuse story out there without making myself completely uncomfortable while doing it. Of course, I was still uncomfortable. Also, you may criticize me for this part, since I do not think it was I was 100% in the right for doing that. After that story released, I was getting called a fetishizer left and right from people who misinterpreted my story as being some sort of romance. I also got sent numerous death threats, gory photos, along with people saying that I got off to the suffering of gay men. I know people do not take death threats over the internet seriously nowadays, because it is common to see people telling others to die. But all this happened when I was in a really bad place in my life and derived all my happiness from the internet. So, you can imagine how hurt I was when the only safe space I had was destroyed for me. I was extremely vulnerable when I posted that story, and expected to gain a small community of people who have also been through what I have been through. But instead, I got told to die, sent to gore, and called an abuser myself. Besides me being disgusted with my body and the way people treated it, this was one of the other reasons I transitioned. I know it sounds like a really dumb reason, but I was extremely self-conscious of what others thought of me, and I wanted the internet to be a safe space for me again. I also wanted to get more stories out like that, but without the backlash, especially since I aspire to be a writer, specifically one that writes about trauma and its effects. I thought transitioning to a man would stop all of the backlash, since I'd technically be a gay/bi man myself. But I was not a man to them. I was a trans man, aka a woman. So, nothing's changed. I was still called a fetishizer and still sent death threats and gore. I do not know what to do. I do not like being trans, and I do not like being a woman. I wish I was born a man instead, but that's not something I can achieve by being transgender. I want to kind of settle and just say I'm non-binary and in turn identify as a lesbian and only date women from now on. But as a non-binary person, I will be in the middle ground of all this foolishness I'm going through. I will be treated as a trans person and as a woman. I have seen how people treat non-binary people and it's a mixture of what I'm going through. So I don't know. Can somebody please give me some advice? What do I do? From the comments, one person adds, honestly, I do not have any advice for you, but just wanted to say that I thought your post was compelling and well written. So, if you have been discouraged from writing more because of the hateful outbursts of a bunch of profoundly confused and nasty people, that would be a shame. I found your post heartbreaking. As an older person, reading through this just makes it so crystal clear how much the disembodied fantasy worlds of the internet are damaging and confusing young people who grew up steeped in them, literally wiring their brains to adapt to an artificial digital world that has no grounding in reality. None of these ideas or worries should be going through your head at all this age. None of it makes sense. I know I probably sound like an old out of touch person, but I've always been fairly progressive and ahead of social trends. But with this new situation with teenagers forming their identity in a disembodied artificial digital world that's powered by a desire and envy and fantasy and insecurity and performance and anonymity and brutality is just, I am so sorry. This has been your world. Please know that whatever decision you make, I guarantee in 5 years' time you will look back and not even remotely be able to relate to the things you worry about and care about now. Death threats from strangers over a fiction story? None of this is normal. Another commenter adds, I had the same experience as you. I had online friends, and in the beginning, I told them I was a cis man for the same reasons as you, and I was afraid of sexualization of my female parts. And I was feeling comfortable knowing me as a cis man. But I was feeling very guilty for lying to them, and I decided to leave. I am desisting the past 9 months. I personally wasn't trans to begin with. I believe trans individuals exist, but is rare rather than the amount of people identifying with this these days. I hope that your pain is going to end soon, and I wish the best to you and your journey. And don't be hard on yourself no matter what. Next post, titled Lupron and Handicapping Long-Term Joint Pain. I am new to this place, as you can tell from my account, but I am a 28-year-old detrans man who was on Lupron for over 6 years before detransitioning and stopping all HRT almost 3 years ago, and it has left me with chronic joint pains that have been preventing me from doing much more than just living. I cannot enjoy my hobbies. Any physical activity is out the door. I can't even take proper walks. Some people might revel in the idea of sitting and watching TV for the rest of their life, but I do not. I need to be active, and I can't even play video games without my hands killing me. I am desperate for any help with this. I have been to many doctors for over a year now, and none of them can find the source of the problem. Even my hormone doctor has said nothing about it and even told me to just ignore and live with it. But I'm realizing now that it might actually be from the Lupron he gave me all these years. After just a brief search, I found so many anecdotes and statistics of people suffering from the same chronic joint pains that I am to various degrees. Some completely handicapped and unable to even stand. I cannot find so much about a solution, if there even is one. I am hoping now that someone here can point me to anything of use, or even share their own experiences if they are in a similar position. I just managed to figure out how to handle my dysphoria, and now I want my life back. I want to be able to play the musical instruments I've spent a decade and a half practicing, and that I now cannot touch for more than 10 minutes a day. I want to be able to go out with my friends. Cannot even get myself to the doctor without feet and knees hurting like hell for days after. TLDR. If anyone knows how to help recover from Lupron and handicapping joint pain, please help me. From the comments. I wish I knew what to advise because I am in a similar boat, except my bones aren't the main cause of it. The muscular dystrophy from long-term puberty suppression and testosterone is doing it on my end. Another commenter adds, look into people with prostate cancer. They take Lupron to manage the cancer on a regular basis. If anyone would have figured out the joint pain problem, it would likely be among those who have taken it prior to widespread use among the transgender community. Another person says, it may not be caused by the Lupron. See other doctors. Follow up with multiple opinions. It is the only way you can be sure your current medical professional isn't just being willfully ignorant one way or another. If it's the result of Lupron, I have bad news for you. Your best bet moving forward will be managing pain and avoiding strenuous activities that may further permanently damage your joints. Fighting through the pain to try and live like you used to is how your body can go from a little bit of functionality to no functionality. Take things slow and easy until you know what is going on and what your limits are. The original poster replies, I really hope that is not the case. I have been doing several tests and I've been to multiple specialists and I'm looking into fifth, sixth, and seventh opinions too. But it's looking more and more like it could be nothing else but Lupron, as the symptoms don't point to anything else. I really hope this is not the rest of my life, because I do not have one anymore like this. I am already minimizing strain to avoid damage, like you said, because I don't want to damage myself before I can get fixed. But if there is no fix, then I don't know what to do with myself. Next post, titled, My Friends Just Cut Me Off Clean. Growing up queer, I have always gravitated towards other queer people. Either because I related to them more easily, or because I found myself in places where I was basically only allowed to socialize with other queer people. I identified myself as gay as a teenager, and then I identified myself as a trans woman in my adulthood. Right now, my main friend group is totally made up of genderqueer people. I use these words in quotes because I do not think they are accurate ways of describing anybody's experience with gender and sex. Anyways, when I desisted, I stopped going outside for a long time, and then a few months later reconnected with this friend group because one of them needed help moving. Having desisted, I feel like my experience is constantly politicized against my will, by others and by myself. I wish it weren't political, but it is. When I came back into close community with these kids, I started to notice how paralyzed their politics were. I did not talk about my experience without carefully stepping over words or phrases that I knew would offend them. Ultimately, though, I tried not to lie about what I believed, and I did my best to only talk with them about what I thought in their terms. Whenever I talked about my frustration with gender in general, even the gender roles ascribed to non-binary people, they would understand. So I started feeling comfortable speaking more plainly about trans ideology, posting links to radical feminist lectures on Instagram, commenting on the trans ideologues' posts, and that is when they started gradually realizing that we fundamentally disagreed. They, one by one, started talking about me behind my back, blocking me, and sending me messages about how they do not want to be my friends with me. Never once did any of them ever try to engage with anything I said. I just got off the phone with one of them and they said they were done and very disgusted with my behavior. We are co-workers, so we are going to be seeing each other a lot, and things are going to be terrible. I'm mainly worried about my job. I have actually spoken randomly to my boss about my politics. My boss and I come from a similar background, and I can talk with her a little more easily than my other co-workers can. The friend who had chosen to start ignoring me is a more highly valued employee, and I'm nervous that I'll be fired, since the team energy is so important to the success of the job. I'm also just sad that I'm going to be seeing this person and their weird energy every day, and it's going to suck the joy out of this job. I love this job so much, the first job I've ever really loved. It would be hard for me to leave and hard to stay. I have one friend with whom I am the closest out of all this friend group. Them and I talk politically a lot, and they seem to respect me as a person. They also happen to work at this job, and I called them tonight since I was on the phone with my other friend. They mentioned that this one that I am very close to has been reconsidering our friendship. That breaks my heart, that I would hear it this way. I have been making new friends over the past few months anyways, and they're blossoming. I'm just sad that this is what's going on with these friends. It reminds me of middle school. Very disappointing and also just absurd. When my friends said they were disgusted with me, I almost laughed. You are disgusted that I posted an Andrea Dworkin speech about porn? Like LMFAO. Update. I had work yesterday with the kids who have been ignoring me. They were very cruel. It was heartbreaking, and they also made me very angry. They were just pretending like I was not there, and they were leaving me hard work. So I put in my 2 weeks, unfortunately. From the comments, one person adds, "Yeah, it's wild how much backlash you can receive for even questioning some aspects of gender discussion. Hell, I am posting this on an alt because I'd probably get banned and excommunicated from communities I'm on my main for saying what I actually think about stuff." Another commenter adds, "This is the sad state of our world today. I am old enough to remember when being offensive wasn't the greatest sin a human could commit and would get you othered by society. You are better off without these people in your life. None of them can even be respected for being adult enough to come forward with you, to discuss the things that made them uncomfortable or offended." Another person adds, "I have not lost any friends since desisting. I lost most of them during my transition for unrelated reasons, and I attribute that a lot to how I sort of just keep myself to myself in regards to politics. I was also never that close with LGBT circles, although I have a few friends who are LGBT. You sort of learn as you get older that real friends shouldn't care about your political opinions to the point of disownment, as long as they're not super extreme, like NS or something like that. I rarely ever talk about politics with my friends because we do not care to, and the ones who do know I share similar opinions." Another commenter adds, "I am just going to come out and say it. Nothing, not identifying as trans, being a woman, being an ethnic minority, has led to as much immediate prejudice and really vitriolic hate directed towards me as just mentioning that I've detransitioned. Doesn't matter if I say anything else. That fact alone is enough for a very, very large group of people to automatically condemn me as everything from hateful to genocidal, without anything else about me taken into account. I have been repeatedly banned from IRL social clubs, subreddits, and Discord servers that have nothing to do with anything LGBT just because someone figures out or I mentioned that in my past I identified as a trans man and now no longer do. At some point, it has to be noted that it doesn't matter if you coddle these people to hell and back and say they're okay to make their own choices or anything else they insist you say. Just the act of having transitioned and then later detransitioned in your past is enough for these people to fully capital H hate us. They automatically twist us merely existing as an existential threat to their lives. No matter if we say nothing about anything transgender/medical transition related for the rest of our lives. People who OP and I am describing as unwell and unstable. Unfortunately, they are also common. We all have to stop giving them power and concessions because they're frankly bigots and so deeply insecure with their own choices that they think that other people exercising their own autonomy is something to have a meltdown over. We need to fight back against that, meaning we lose our opportunities and livelihoods, but should consider ourselves lucky when they remove themselves from their social circles. Speaking as a holder of a post-grad psychology degree, the types of people who cannot stand to remain friends with others who make different choices than they would for themselves are not mentally well, do not have stable personalities or mood, and most likely aren't the types to be able to maintain healthy long-term relationships of any kind." Someone replies to this comment, "Yep, this is the same psychology of any group that holds one. Deep held beliefs, that too. require a lot of sacrifices and social defenses, but 3 are ultimately not rational and don't have evidence that will make the belief system seem reasonable to an objective outsider. Usually, you see it in religious fundamentalists. Their deepest hatred is towards apostates, not people who never believed in the first place. That's because believing in something irrational with no evidence, if it requires massive sacrifice or buying costs, causes a massive amount of cognitive dissonance and one has to build up extremely thick mental defensive systems in order to keep that dissonance quelled. One of the defenses is social support and hearing your choir constantly preach to you without any doubt or wavering of faith. Non-believers can be chalked up to ignorance or hatred. They just don't get it. But when one of your flock who does get it voluntarily stops believing, it creates a huge crack in that defensive system that's been built up to protect against doubts and dissonance. They react in fury to bolster that defense. They cannot allow consideration of such doubts to enter their own mind when they've sacrificed so much. This is why those who have given up and sacrificed the most are the hardest true believers. It's too emotionally painful to doubt. But ironically, it's also why it's the biggest true believers who can often swing most dramatically in the opposite direction if their defensive system ever does come down. Because it's the Hoover Dam bursting. They represented such a massive amount of cognitive dissonance that if a big enough crack is made, then the flood comes out. I've seen this happen with friends who were once the most absolutely devout believers in a fundamentalist religion. When they left, it wasn't after years of slow change, but seemingly almost overnight wild change to becoming hardcore atheists. The more moderate people left on a slower timeline. P.S. I doubt it's true your close friend is actually reconsidering your friendship. Sounds to me like close friend is being pressured and hectored by ex-friend to drop you. Close friend probably needed to tell ex-friend they were reconsidering just to get them off their back. And yes, this is a total 7th grade mean girl pressure campaign. Another commenter replies to the previous main commenter. This one. They're not really calling you genocidal. What they're doing is suppressing the knowledge they subconsciously understand, which is that a variety of social forces have led them to genocide themselves. Being aware of detransitioners unclamps the lid on that underlying knowledge and hurts because all the work people do to feel okay about serializing and visibly stigmatizing themselves gets messed up by seeing someone leave the trans path. It's a community that has been forcing through soft power to kill itself off and knows this, but is trying so hard to keep a stiff upper lip. Seeing someone escape is a reminder of how bad things actually are. Sure, people choose this life, but they also only choose transition because that's what people are encouraging us to do. Encouraging genocide of the mentally ill, homosexuals, and other unwanteds. Another person comments on the original post, "Congratulations for waking up." And another person adds, "Something similar happened to me recently, actually. I lost a whole group of friends because re-identifying as a woman led me to questioning gender as a concept, and that was apparently not allowed. What's really ironic is that only days before this began, I had talked with one of them, who holds a master's degree, about living in an age of anti-intellectualism." And now to this video's last post, titled, Does anyone have lung/rib issues from binding? I have asthma. During a recent exam, they told me there's a lot of fluid stuck in my lower lungs. At first, I did not connect this to binding, but then I realized sometimes when my ribs are up against some surfaces, They kind of feel constricted like they did in my binders. I don't know if my lower lungs are just messed up already, or if it is the cause of binding. I didn't bind too much. 10 hours a day tops. It didn't seem that tight. But I'm pretty sure yes, the binding constricted my lower lungs. By the way, I haven't worn a binder for 3 to 4 years. Does anyone else have evidence of rib/lung damage from binding? Especially things that have been noted by doctors. I'm curious. By the way, I will post this to a trans sub, as I'd probably get more responses, but I'm super not comfortable with that. Not super comfortable with that. Now, from the comments. I'm so glad when I was trans, I always found binding way too painful. I have a lot of back pain and respiratory problems to begin with, so when I first tried binding, I instantly knew how much it would hurt my body. But nowadays, there are so many people pushing, try binding, it's super empowering. As if it's something fun and easy that everyone should try. It makes me worried for the young people. Binding isn't some cool feminist trend. It's a last resort for people with severe body issues, and it comes with serious side effects even when done properly. Another person adds, I was non-binary and binding messed me up. I was binding starting 12 to 13 when I was still growing, at least 10 hours a day every day. I don't know if it's because of the binding, but I have a very limited lung capacity now and it's hard to breathe in all the way. Another person adds, Dude, yes, binding is horrible for your ribs and lungs, don't do it. Another person adds, It didn't happen to me, but I had trans friends that had that happen to them. It's not uncommon. Another person adds, Yes, I can't prove it's from binding, but I think it is. I had asthma as a child until it was cured by hypnosis. My CAT scans apparently show fluid in the bottom of my lungs. It was making breathing difficult. I'm going to ask for another one or an MRI to check how it's developing. It's upsetting because I really liked binding and now I have to find another way of dealing with my problems. I need to stay away from ED territory. I only ever used compression wear, oversized binders that I could put over my head, sports bras, or tape. Another person adds, My upper body is severely deformed. It's not solely from binding, but wearing a binder almost every day of my teens since I was 12 probably contributed to it. I have scoliosis and kyphosis, and my chest is also deformed. I think the term is pectus carinatum. I hate it. Another person adds, The surgeon who did my mastectomy asked if I have scoliosis. No, because something I can't remember was off about my ribs. He didn't mention binding. He just said, I guess you're just built weird. LMAO. But I had been binding for 6 years at that point and nobody had ever noticed it as a kid. So it's possible, I guess. And another person adds, Yes, my chest is deformed, specifically my lower ribs. Instead of going straight down my torso, they stick up slightly. The same kind of damage you'd see in Victorian women wearing corsets, basically. Or like Chinese foot binding. It's the only permanent damage that can't be fixed for me. I always did it safely, by never wearing it more than 8 hours a day, with GC2B, the safest brand, for 4 years, on and off total. And I still have a chest deformity. So just don't do it ever because our bodies are malleable. Why would you want your ribs squeezed together to the point where your lower ribs are narrower than your actual waist at a healthy weight? If you become fitter, your ribs stick out like an anorexic. And that'll be the end of today's video. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.